Hi, I'm Gail.
And hi, I'm Catherine. Welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, our award-winning weekly podcast. Please visit womenover70.com. Join Aging Reimagined Circle. One of the benefits of membership is free participation in our monthly online programs. And plan to attend our first live symposium in LaGrange Park, Illinois, on October 19, 2024. We will celebrate 5 years, 300 episodes, and so much more. Will you be among the first 150 attendees? See womenover70.com for information.
And today we welcome Marcia Naomi Berger. Naomi's 79, grew up in New York, and now lives in Marin County, California. Naomi is a licensed clinical social worker, having learned from her own experience the importance of marriage, love, and relationships. She was 29 when she experienced her first manic episode. Several others followed, and it wasn't until her doctor prescribed lithium that life began to even out. For a respected psychotherapist, Naomi's life turned upside down. We could say more, however, this story needs to be told by Naomi herself. So welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, Naomi.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on our show. So how were you able to understand what was happening to you? And can you fill us in a little bit about this mental illness? Is it unusual for bipolar to first show up in your late 20s?
My understanding is that it does show up at different times for different people. It's considered that mostly it shows up in adolescence up until mid-20s. But, I think at different times I've heard different statistics about it. At one point, I thought my age when I got it was considered a normal time to get it. So, but it comes when it comes.
Yes. And can you tell us a little bit more about the illness? Describe it for us a bit.
Well, I can describe my illness as sometimes it's different for different people. When I had the big problems for me that resulted in hospitalizations were when I became manic. And manic behavior often includes lack of sleep in my case, it was at least 2 or 3 nights with no sleep and mind racing and some kinds of delusional thoughts where you're not really reality based. You think that things are a certain way and they're not. I often, actually in each episode I had a delusion that somebody was going to marry me, even though the relationship wasn't at a point where anybody was talking about marriage. At least the guy wasn't. And, but that was something that was one of my delusions. And I had just so many different thoughts running through my head. And I thought I was brilliant. I mean, you do things that when you're manic, you're on top of the world and it can be fun for a while, before things happen and then you crash. So that's my quick way of describing mania.
Yeah, right. I've always heard that there's ups and downs.
Yeah, and it's different for different people. There's some people have more downs and maybe some ups, but not to the point of getting hospitalized. And in my case, I didn't have, when I was hospitalized, it was always from mania. And there were times when I was depressed and it was situational. And one time a very dear friend of mine, her boyfriend committed suicide, and that seemed to trigger me into a depression. Other times depressed because of, after a hospitalization, there's this shame and stigma. And I think I was depressed because of that. And whether you call it clinical depression or extreme sadness, it's sometimes hard to draw the line between what it is, what you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. And who was in your personal life at that time, during those times?
Oh, my personal life? Well, before my first episode, I was a respected psychotherapist. I was providing clinical supervision to some of the other therapists at this alcoholism treatment center where I worked. And I had a nice group of friends, women friends, and I dated. I had boyfriends from time to time. And so I had my career and I had a nice social life. And I wasn't aware that anything was missing. I probably had moments. So I had moments like when I was in Hawaii by myself and I think that it might have been 27. This is actually before the manic episode started. And Hawaii I went as a single woman and all by myself and surrounded in Hawaii by loving couples. People go to Hawaii. If you're in California, that's often a honeymoon destination or an anniversary destination. So people of all ages. And I remember my last night in Hawaii, I stayed at a nice hotel and I looked at myself in the mirror and I started crying. And it dawned on me that I was missing what I saw around me there. And then I went back to California and I forgot about all that because I had a nice life. and in California, it was single people and that was normal.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Quite an experience. You said when we talked that your early life was rough, that your mother was divorced and your grandmother was abandoned by her husband. And so, but you went on to do wonderful work on relationships as a psychotherapist. So how did that all fit together?
I had a lot of material to work with. So, I had a struggle to get where I guess I always did want to get married, but I had these things in my background that spoke against it because my grandmother was a poor immigrant, and at the time when she came to America, it was unfortunately, it was very sadly, a lot of husbands abandoned their wives because life wasn't what they had dreamed it would be, and I guess they felt burdened by having to try to make a living and take care of a wife, and in my grandmother's case, a family, as she already had one child and she was pregnant with my mother when he left her. And I don't know, what he would say, why he left, but he was gone. My mother never met him. My mother got divorced and that pained her terribly. She wanted to stay married. So in effect, it was like I have this history of abandonment by husbands. And so I dated in this way that is not an unusual pattern for women who are ambivalent about marriage. We date men that are not available for marriage, and we pine after the ones who are. Well, we pine after the ones that are not available, and we find I call it warts. We find out what's wrong right away with the ones that are wanting to have a serious relationship leading to commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for a long time.
So, and then what happened?
Well, I got some good therapy and I found mentors who were either role models for a good marriage or had very good information for me. I think when you don't see a good marriage growing up, you think marriage is supposed to be like an effortless, happily ever after experience, or it's a catastrophe. So when something goes wrong, I thought, okay, that's it. No more. I don't want to have anything to do with this person. And then I learned through various people and also probably through therapy, I understood my pattern. And eventually I got past it. Thank God.
Yes. Yeah. Good. So, your practice, as we said, does concentrate on relationships. And are you still a practicing psychotherapist?
Yeah, I still have a psychotherapy practice, and mostly lately couples have been coming to see me. I wrote a book that teaches couples how to have a weekly marriage meeting, and I'm really really grateful that it has done a lot for so many people who are getting the book and actually having the meetings, and people who aren't ready to have the meetings. Some of them I will coach through my therapy practice.
Where is that book available, Naomi?
You can get it on the usual online. You can ask your local bookstore for it, and it's in lots of libraries too.
And what's the title?
It's called Marriage Meetings for Lasting Love, 30 minutes a week to the relationship you've always wanted.
Sounds interesting.
I wrote that book, and then I wrote another book for people who are single and want to get married. And that's called Marriage Minded, an A to Z dating guide for lasting love. And I wasn't going to write those books. I was going to write The Bipolar Therapist. I didn't have a name for it yet. I was going to call it Rockaway. I started that book about 18 years ago. And I couldn't write it. I wasn't ready. There'd been so much stigma and so much harassment I'd experienced at work that I was keeping my illness, if you want to, my bipolar disorder. I was keeping it a secret from almost everybody who didn't already know me from when it actually happened. So I was trying to write a book about my whole life and the experience, a memoir. But I started writing about Rockaway and how I loved the beach and how awful it was that my parents got divorced but I never got up to my episodes, my manic episodes. And then meanwhile, I wrote these 2 books about marriage. I was doing fine and working and writing my other books. And then finally I got to the point where it just had to come out. I had to write The Bipolar Therapist. And, because I think people need to know, and people who do have a mental illness need to know that they're not alone, and they should not bow down to stigma, and to learn that they should be treated like anybody with any kind of an illness, as a multifaceted person who has a lot to give to the world.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned harassment. And so what experience did you have with that?
Oh, I had men at work coming on to me in different ways. There was a former minister I had a good collegial relationship with. I was supervising him as an intake worker at the Alcoholism Treatment Center. He and his wife had just adopted a baby. During our clinical supervision session, he said to me, well, what if a supervisee wants to sleep with his supervisor? And I was like shocked. And I said, well, you're married, And he said, well, she got what she wanted. Eating the baby, But there were worse things. I was touched inappropriately. People felt like they could do anything to me because I had a mental illness. Wow. And they had seen it because I had a manic episode at work. My first episode was in New York, and on the way to New York for my sister's wedding when I was 29. But a year later, I had an episode at work. So people saw me running through the halls, breaking in on therapy sessions.
Wow. I can't imagine how that must have been. And so you, do you treat people with mental disorders as a psychotherapist?
Well, I have. I worked at a psychiatric, this kind of a strange, ironic thing that the Alcoholism Treatment Center where I was treated terribly by, fortunately, I had some people who treated me well there. I had a couple of good friends who we would go out to lunch, and they were loyal and supportive. I'm grateful for them. But it was a toxic atmosphere for me when I got recruited to work at a psychiatric hospital where my patients were schizophrenic, or it was called manic depressive then, with it's now called called bipolar disorder. It used to be called manic depression. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of experience treating them. In my private practice now, I get the gamut, and probably I get more people. I don't know if it's a California thing, but more people, if they have some kind of illness, if you call it an illness, people then have been through AA, and they have stopped drinking and be very, seems to be more likely in recovery. And but mostly people that don't have a diagnosis and are coming to see me for couple therapy. Sometimes people are taking medication for anxiety or depression.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So was it a hard decision to write The Bipolar Therapist, A Journey from Madness to Love and Meaning? Tell us about the love.
Well, the love, well, gosh, because there's some sub-themes in the book besides the manic depression. There's the theme of how I get past my conflict about getting married. And I don't know, it's just like, the expression, I find true love, but I don't mean it like that. I mean it like love, like I could trust that this person was going to stay with me. There's no guarantee, but it felt right. And I had learned enough to trust myself to choose wisely. Mm-hmm. And another aspect of the love is the relationship with my mother. That's another theme in the book. May she rest in peace. Gone a long time now, but I was estranged from her for a year after my first hospitalization, and because I blamed her for it, I was in her house when I ran out onto the street screaming, and she called the police because she didn't know what to do, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I was taken to a snake pit hospital. And I blamed her for that for a year. And then after I had my second hospitalization a year later, I couldn't blame her anymore. But I actually had started to reconcile with her during my second manic episode. I ended up phoning her really late at night, and it was like we had never been apart. She was like, "Hi," Yeah. So there's a lot of love. A lot of the love with my mother, I'd say, is another theme, and how it withstood what we went through.
Right.
And what about meaning?
I'm sorry. Sorry, what?
Meaning is in your title also.
The meaning. Right. Okay. So how do we make sense of it all? And I have my own view of how it makes sense to me, but other people may have a different view because I've talked it over with different friends. So I think if people read The Bipolar Therapist, it would be very interesting to know what the meaning is for them.
When did your book come out?
It came out officially on May 1st, so just a little over a month ago.
Okay. And so that's really recent. What kind of response have you gotten to it so far?
Well, my book launch was wonderful. That was just a wonderful experience because, a lot of my motivation in writing the book, it was definitely cathartic for me to write it. But the other part is that I want people to know that they're not alone in the mental illness. So my book launch, a lot of people have a relative, and I found out later that somebody who came, her mother told me later, and her mother lives far away, but apparently, she lived in the part of California where I live in Marin County. So she told me her daughter had a mental illness and came to my talk, and she found it uplifting. And this was somebody who had several suicide attempts. So it means a lot to me to know that people are being reached.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So how do you think about your own aging, Naomi? We like to.
It's so hard to think about aging. I want to tell myself that age doesn't matter. I just want to live my life. I heard somebody say that. He said, I don't think about my age. I just live my life. And I think I do that most of the time. Now, in reality, I don't know if I'm going to ski anymore. I love skiing. And I don't know if I'm going to roller skate anymore. It's hard for me to say I'll never do it again. But I had a pretty bad roller skating injury a few years ago. And for a while, I skated with something like a pillow tie strapped around my back so I would get hurt again. I don't give up easily. But then there's the pandemic and everything stopped, and I haven't gone back to skate since then. It was a very nice situation where they'd have a adults only time at the skating rink, and it wouldn't be really crowded, and it was like a nice social group. But I'm kind of scared to go back. But I can still do lots of things that are wonderful. and, find different ways to find excitement and stimulation, and especially to feel like I'm useful. And that's why a lot of people retire at my age, but I don't think it's a good idea for me because I need it.
So when you're not working as a therapist, what are some of the things that you really enjoy doing?
Well, I love to write. Love to write. I don't think I'm going to write any good books, but you never know. So I like to read. Also, I like to read novels. I like to play pickleball. Pickleball is a big
You're a pickleball fan.
Are you? I love it.
Everybody loves it.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think I'm ever, again, about aging. There are people that are much better at than me, and I have to find my group of people that are okay with somebody that's not an expert. And there are people like that, so that's great. We have a lot of fun, and I like to keep up generally with exercise. I swim. I want to be able to lift more things because I'm not a strong person, but I'm doing some exercises where I'm trying to strengthen my upper body with using hand weights and machine. And I like to take walks, and I love to talk to my friends, and
Full active life.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our listeners on any of the subjects that we've covered?
Or have it?
Well, okay. Yeah, I will. I will say that it's really important, whatever your situation is, not to let people define you. Not to including about aging, not to have people say, oh, you're too old for this or that. Well, maybe you are, but it shouldn't define you. And you should know that you can live a full, meaningful life. And this is a little tidbit from my mother. She would say, find happiness in every day. So with all she went through, she found happiness, and she kept moving forward in her life. She became a physical education teacher, and she loved it. She would teach the girls in the gym classes, dances. Sometimes she would make up dances. And so she kept moving forward. The divorce was rough. That was a hard thing, but she did end up having a wonderful second marriage to a great guy who she met in her 70s and married. And so the keep moving forward and not letting people define you and finding happiness in every day. Say those are three takeaways for me.
Yeah, those are
Really
essential. Yeah, very, very important.
right.
Well, thank you so much, Naomi, for talking with us today and sharing your story.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And listeners, because of your loyalty, our numbers continue to grow. Still, we'd like to see more of you at our monthly online programs. So join Age and Reimagine Circle and participate for no charge. Make your voice heard and help us change the conversation about women aging. We hope to see you in